Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tuesday, February 5th, 2019 School Committee meeting here at Tyngsborough High School, 7 p.m. I officially call this meeting to order. I will remind everyone that these meetings are audio and video recorded, and we'll start with introductions to my left.
Robert Mullen.
Julie Pastucci.
Good evening, Mike Moran.
Good evening, Mark Blanco, Assistant Superintendent.
Hi, Mike Flanagan, Superintendent.
Anthony Thorell.
Ryan McMahon.
Paul Mitchell.
Joe Messina, School Business Administrator.
Thank you all. Would you please rise for the pledge of allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone. If I could get a motion to approve the January 22nd and January 8th, 2019 School Committee meeting minutes and the January 8th and January 7th, 2019 Executive Session and Tri-Board meetings.
Make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries 6-0-0. Correspondence?
We've none at this time.
Visitors, comments, and questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm David Marcucci. I was here a couple of weeks ago, and I just wanted to follow up on some of what was talked about last time. So I actually wasn't prepared to speak last time, but when I saw the proposal, I decided that I had to say something. I've had much more time to look at the proposal and go through and gather some thoughts. And last time I had asked the board to take a look at the particular line item around the OT department in public schools and what was happening there as far as the changes go, and educate yourselves on the role of the OT. So I did some of that work, and just to remind people what it was there was a proposal to shift from today having 1.6 FTE OTRs and 0.8 FTE of CODAs to 2.0 FTE of OTRs, so a reduction in total FTEs and a shift over to just using the occupational therapy, registered occupational therapist. I had talked about the difference between the two, so I did some research to educate myself on the difference between the two. And the only difference in the Mass State law is that occupational therapy assistants may not initiate or alter a treatment program without prior evaluation by and approval of the supervising occupational therapist. And occupational therapy assistants may not interpret data beyond the scope of their occupational therapy assistant education. And that's out of the Code of Massachusetts Regulations. I have the references all here. And so I did a deep dive into the budget numbers that were presented to see what we were looking at. And the budget book seems to imply that by making this change, there's about a $5.7 thousand savings year over year, but actually the numbers appear to be wrong. I've done all the calculations. I'm pretty confident with the calculations, and the actual savings appear to be $2,458. So that's what we're talking about with this change to a reduction in overall staff. So I tried to consider the drivers for this change, like why. It wasn't clear in the last meeting why this change was happening. There was a vague comment there on the presentation, but I tried to look at what the drivers would be for this change. So I considered an increase in OT needs, testing or services, or potentially a desire to reduce the overall OT cost of the department. And so based on the fact that CODAs can do all the same therapy that an OT can do, a change in service needs wouldn't make sense for a driver for that. Testing, I actually did some research, and it looks like the average testing that an OTR does is about 13%. So it's a small percentage of their work. So better use of the current OT staff could certainly address if there was a change in testing needs. And then I also did some calculations, and I found that if it was really a desire to cut the budget and move to just 2 FTE, there's actually a scenario that saves $36,000. So it clearly isn't the best scenario for that either. And then I looked at what you'd be getting with the change, and based on that reduction of labor and based on some numbers that I gathered from a online reference from another state around caseload and workload for therapists, you would lose the capacity to service about 18 students from OT. you would lose 504 hours of labor, and you'd increase the overall hourly cost of the OT department by about $10 an hour. And you'd really be setting yourselves up for a service delivery problem in the long term. So I just wanted to bring those points to the committee, and I'd like to see a better plan for addressing whatever the challenges are that are trying to be addressed by this change, or maybe some clarification on what challenge is trying to be addressed. And I'm happy to answer any questions or speak with anyone at any time about this.
Well, first, thank you for coming out this evening. Thank you. Voicing your concerns. I'll open it up to the board if they have any questions.
Do you have that all in a condensed package?
I do. I actually have a presentation. I have a spreadsheet, of course. Everyone does spreadsheets with all the numbers.
Okay.
So I'm happy to
Could you send that
share
to the
that.
committee?
Yeah.
So we can look at it?
Absolutely.
If you just want to forward it to Dr. Flanagan and
I'll get
he
it to
can
him.
send it out to all of us.
Happy to do that.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Of course, I will say that the budget's a living document.
Of
It's
course.
constantly changing.
That's why I'm trying to get ahead of it.
Yeah, we have no idea what our numbers are. We haven't settled on anything, obviously. We don't know what our chapter 70 is going to be. There's a lot that's going into this, so it's. But I thank you for your input, and if you can forward those documents to Dr. Flanagan. And
Sure. I'll do that.
Thank you.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Sophie Campbell's not here this evening, so
I would like to make a motion to take 9C out of order.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Mr. Chair, we have high school principal, Mr. Ogden, and high school business teacher, Mr. Rick, here to talk a little bit about DECA. This is a new program this year. This is actually a new proposal. We've never had a DECA team. Actually, I take that back. We did in mid-90s, mid to late 90s. But Zach has revived the program this year a little bit, and there's a potential competition that they're going to tell you a little bit about tonight and seek your approval for a trip.
So thank you for having us here tonight. We're here, as Dr. Flanagan said, to seek approval for an overnight trip based on the success of our students that qualified for the state competition. So I'll pass it off to Mr. Rickall, who is the advisor, to tell you more about it.
Yeah, so thanks for having me tonight. Zach Richell, business teacher at Tyngsborough High School. And what, obviously the big question is like what DECA is. So when I was at school, right, I went to Clark University, a lot of my friends were talking about, oh, we did this in DECA. We got to go to Florida for DECA. We got to go to Nashville for DECA. I was like, what is DECA? So like I had the same question, and finally my cousin did it, and he was raising money for it. He was explaining to everyone. And basically it's just like, it's a club that runs around business principles. So on January 9th, I took 14 students to UMass Lowell. It was district competition, and these students had prepared for certain role plays based on different fields of business. So we had like principles of marketing, or we had hotel and transportation like management. We had all these different forms of just competitions that were going on, and it was really cool. Like, if I don't know if has anyone ever seen one of those competitions take place at UMass Lowell? You have? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there was probably 700, 800 students from Billerica, Westford, Tewksbury, and a lot of them have been doing it for 4 years. So seniors, so our kids were kind of like shell-shocked by the number of kids that were there. And we actually were lucky enough to have 3 students qualify in the top 6 in their field in advance. What that is an invitation to states, and that means that they get to go and compete in the next level. And that coincides with you have to take a quiz, which they're taking tomorrow, Thursday, or Friday, and then there is 2 role plays they take in Boston, March 7th, 8th, and 9th. So what I'm asking is permission to take them overnight to Boston on leaving Thursday, March 7th around 2 p.m. here, and then the competition will be over Saturday, March 9th around noon or 1-ish. And just how it goes is we'll leave here. Students will have their bags. They'll bring their bags in. They'll be checked by admin, and no other access will be given to those bags, just to avoid any issues going on. And then when they're there, so it'll be 3,100 other students from the state of Massachusetts there. And how they kind of keep everything in line is, I don't know if you guys have been to and seen the Prudential and how it's kind of tunneled in to the other buildings. So there's a couple hotels and it's tunneled in. So DECA actually pays for alumni to be there, and they make sure no one can leave. So they basically locked in these buildings for 2 days. So there's no leaving. There's hotel curfews, and it's very, very strict business professional.
Yeah, it's a national organization that
Yes.
has plenty of safeguards in place for,
Yes.
they run high school events.
Yes, yes. Like they've had a lot of practice with it, right? And there's a lot of. I'm actually giving a presentation to parents Thursday night at 7. So if anyone wanted to come get some more details about it and the whole like safety of the trip, you can do that. But other than that, I'm just asking permission in order to bring them to an overnight field trip in Boston.
Is it one night or two?
It is. So we leave Thursday night. So we stay Thursday night, stay Friday night, come home Saturday afternoon.
And there's 6 kids?
There will be 7 students. So there's a quiz bowl too. So we have 3 kids that advanced for their competitions. And then there's a business quiz bowl, so it's like a business trivia challenge, and that just helps me grow the program, bring more kids, and get more kids excited about it because it really is like a great organization.
What's the benefit? I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, what's the cost of it?
The cost of it is right now, raw cost is $482 per student. We've been doing fundraising. We're hoping to get it down to around $300 per student. But now that this is the first year, and it will have it running for a full year, fundraising efforts will be a lot better. You know, like I just started this in October, so we haven't really been able to get there, and I'm still figuring a lot out of that. So it is a lot, but we're hoping just to get it down a little more for the students. And yeah, it does seem like a lot, but we're doing pretty good progress. We've already raised close to.
Overnight in Boston for $300.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
I know. With food, food's all provided, so yeah.
Two nights.
Yes.
2 nights, yeah.
So what's the benefit of staying there versus just commuting?
The benefit of staying there is Thursday night they do a business dinner, like a business professional dinner, and you're there and you see like opening ceremonies. So they have you stay over in the hotels for that, obviously, so you're out late, especially prepping. So after the dinner, that dinner ends at 9. Students go for 2 hours to their. They get prepped on what their role plays are going to kind of be and where they have to be the next morning and what time they're going to be at. And then the next night there's like a DECA sponsored dance that all chaperones will be like chaperoning, obviously. I don't know another word for that. Observing, whatever. So there's that. And it just gives them more opportunity to network with fellow students across the state of Massachusetts, as long as there's also gonna be like 40 different vendors there, from like Men's Warehouse to different colleges to different companies giving like talking about summer internships. So it just gives them more opportunities to be there for a certain time and like just network, you know what I mean? Kind of get a feel for
So it's
like
a full schedule
outside.
beyond just the conference?
Yeah, it's a full schedule. I can, if you need the full schedule, I can show you the whole itinerary. Yes.
Is there an opportunity for other kids to go down and see what's going on, even though they're not participating? Or?
Yeah. So actually, on Saturday they do the awards ceremony in the Hyatt Convention Center, and the Hyatt's huge. So any parent, right, any friend, you guys can all come and just see what it's kind of all about. They actually recommend that, especially for programs with their first year, just for like people to see what it's all about. And like it's totally like strict business professional attire. If you're not wearing like, right, if you're not dressed to the nines, they won't even let you up on stage to get your award. If you do win one. So yes, there is a way for other people to come and see them. Other than that, unless you have like a DECA pass, they don't really want. There's mingling going on, obviously. So those places are totally like rented out. Like the public can't really be in those situations.
Sounds good.
Anyone else? Well, thank you for starting the program, Zach.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
You know, it sounds like hopefully this will grow and grow and grow. So
I'll make a motion to approve the DECA 2-day trip to Boston for the state competition.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 6-0. Good luck to you and the students.
Thank you. Yes. If you have any questions, you can ask me.
Mr. Rogge, you'll share all the school committee policies with Zach so he knows.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Good luck.
Are you taking the bus down there? How are we
Oh, man.
We can ask you a little.
We don't want to pay to park the bus for 3 days.
Joe said he'd drive it then.
Take care.
Back to our regular scheduled meeting. Subcommittee updates.
Policy. I'm going to have Paul talk about our policy that we went over today, which was in your drive.
So we've got sort of a situation we'd like to push forward and not go through the regular steps of changing. We're not actually changing a policy, we're just adding some forms to the policy book, I guess. So in front of you, everybody should have 2 forms regarding residency statements. And with the new school year coming up, the elementary school is going out to get these things in front of parents who have new kids coming into the school system. So the first one is a residency statement that has got a little bit more legal information on it, and similar to policies, forms that were are in Lowell and Weston, is it? And so that this gives us a little bit more clout to make sure that the kid that is being brought into the school is actually a Tyngsborough resident. And apparently it's been an issue with in some situations. The second form is a third-party affidavit of residency. So, as it was explained to me, if one of my children moves back into my house, they don't necessarily have a gas bill or a mortgage statement or anything that says that, and I probably wouldn't, maybe I would charge them. I wouldn't give them a statement, they just have to pay. So that they don't have any of the information that's required in our policy. We have 3 sets of information in the policy that shows that you're a Tyngsborough resident. So a third-party resident can provide that information and make an affidavit that that person is living in their house and is essentially a Tyngsborough resident. So we'd like to get these forms approved tonight so that they can be used, because we're not going to be back until March, and we've got to open up some of these application processes
Registration, yeah.
before we get back to our next meeting.
Right.
So I'd like to make a motion to approve the residency statement of parent and guardian affidavit and the residency by third-party affidavit.
Second.
The only discussion I would ask is, we don't see a problem with Mr. Long, all this would be fine.
No, so as I researched them, Principal Kavanaugh and I work with us on these too, so we looked at a lot of exemplar documents that had already been vetted through school district attorneys. And so the heaviest language in both documents is actually the section on a notary public. We have a pretty weak notary public section in there. Everything else is cited Mass General Law and is process, yeah.
Any further discussion?
Just as a point of the notary, we have notaries in the school system so that they, if someone comes in with all the documents, they don't have to go to a bank or somewhere else to get a notary signature.
And just a point of clarification, so this is policy 5.26, and so these forms were in the policy before, but so now what they've done is they've taken the forms out of the policies, and these are part of the addendum or whatever. So now it'll be much easier going forward, we can just update the addendums, we don't have to update the policy, so,
And that's something we started years ago.
yeah. So, yeah.
I have a motion, I have a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried 6-0. Thank you. Thank
Carrie
you.
will be happy.
Personnel,
None at this time.
unfinished business, Capital Asset Committee.
A week ago, we had our first meeting as a capital asset committee, including the assistant town administrator, the accountant, the finance committee member, board of selectmen member. We went over some different requests just to start familiarizing ourselves with it. We weren't getting into each one of them. However, I did start talking about our roof situation, especially since it was funny, at the beginning of the meeting, the town accountant was very quick to state that we don't plan on borrowing anything this year, which in my opinion went kind of against what they were talking about originally at the tri-board, saying that they have all this capacity to borrow, and patting themselves on the back for creating that. So we talked about the items that we believe that are really the priorities for the school department. We talked about the fire panel here at the high school, which ties into some of the detectors up through the ceilings. That I don't believe is a real problem. There was a bit of resistance with the roof, asking why wasn't it on the list previously, but you tell them that it's an emergency situation. It came up. We just realized this. They were understanding of that. I think we're going to have to press both the administration and possibly the Board of Selectmen over there in Town Hall to seriously consider this. I did talk about how the roof is still 2 to 3 years away from being eligible for a fast repair through the MSBA, just as we had done the roof on the high school. But waiting that long for us to be able to qualify that is just asking for additional problems within the roofing system, with potential of mold, additional damage to the shingles. Especially, Ryan Guthrie, our building facilities manager, and I had an additional discussion last week about the condition of the roof. Mostly because one of the questions that came up was, why can't we repair it? Why can't we do some repairs to at least prolong the life of it? And with the roof as it is, we're losing shingles all the time off of that on the inclined portions of the roof over there. And trying to track down certain areas where it may be leaking is difficult, because the water might be getting in one part of the roof, but traveling down the trusses on the inside and dropping down into another room. So trying to track that down is very difficult. So with the loss of so many shingles up there, the cost of repairing that it'd be very expensive to repair at this time, and it also wouldn't guarantee a fix. So we could have some additional issues there. So I'm going to continue to press that.
Have we ever replaced the shingles on that roof? Or are those the original
No.
shingles?
Those are
We've
original.
done patchwork, extensive patchwork.
So what is it, 20?
It's 17 years old this year.
This one goes longer.
Yep. And it needs to be at least 20 years old
Oh,
before.
And if you look at accelerated repair, we're also looking at timing of a middle school and a roof at the elementary school. So, I don't think it's a good idea to oversee all 2 different projects. So we have an issue.
We do. So those 2 items, unless there's a change in the idea of what they want to do financially over there as far as borrowing, I don't think we're going to be able to go much further than that.
And we're looking at like 350 or 400 for the roof.
We have it down as 400,
Yeah.
and then it's for the fire panel at 55,000. So I believe that the fire panel can fall under what they expected to use for out of free cash for capital assets, but the roof would end up having to be borrowed for.
So the 400, is that partial repair, or is that
Complete repair
of the whole?
of all the entire roof of asphalt shingles.
Okay.
Okay, now obviously there's another part of the roof which is a membrane rubber roof. Ryan expects to get at least another 5 to 6 years out of that. Okay, any other questions, any directions? Would anyone like to see anything else from me? Do you have any other questions about maybe what other departments might be looking for?
I love the track at all.
Tracks would be tricky for this year, at least through the initial discussion. Again, if something were to change in their ideas over there, it's something that we can discuss. I know we discussed both the track initially and the tennis courts, the basketball courts at the elementary school. And
So the tennis courts go back to the rec program first.
well, that was actually brought up. It's something that it's something we would love to see. A shared responsibility with that, especially since they use it so frequently, a whole lot more than the school department does. That discussion was made, and looking at a long-term plan on how to finance that between both school and the recreation department. But that's something for the future. Asking them to come up with that money this year to repair it might be a little bit too much for them.
Have all our needs been presented, like the track and the tennis courts?
Oh yeah, we went over well,
What are they?
let me list it for you. We went over the district-wide phone clock and alarm system that is required, especially with some of the issues we're having with voicemail and dropped calls, especially over here on this campus. The tennis court, the roofs, the fire panel, and the track renovation. Those are our items. For this year, we were requesting roughly 1.4 million in repairs.
The tennis courts, I think, year 10 of a 10-year life expectancy, so
They are.
it potentially could go, but we don't want to be in a situation where it's like the track where you kick the can down the road.
Do you know what material that is? Is that asphalt?
It's some kind of mix of asphalt, hard truths, it's an asphalt material, most likely.
I jokingly brought up, last year we bought the highway department quite a bit of paving equipment, and whether it's something that they might be able to take over.
I think there's an asphalt base and then there's another layer of special.
Sure, and, I didn't know what the material was, but it was just trying to come up with some different ways of addressing it. Because they have the equipment to rough that up and to pour new asphalt. But not saying that that's actually an option or not.
So can you explain the process a little bit? Can they just get to decide we're not borrowing, so we just lose our projects? Who makes that call?
Well, the decision not to borrow is a decision between the town administrator, the financial team of the town accountant, the finance director, and the Board of Selectmen. They decide what they have for finances, what they would like to do as far as borrowing, if they would like to, if they would or not, what they would like to do with free cash as a whole, whether it's to put it into reserve accounts, whether it's to pay off bills from the previous year, the one bill that they can, which is the snow and ice removal from that money, or to invest it into capital items. So that board, those group of people and the board of selectmen decide what they want to do with that. It's an initial discussion. So then they present that to us and the other departments. They ask the other departments and the school department, what are our needs for this year? And between Ryan, Mike, and Joe, they put together a 3 to 5 year plan on what we might need, or what we expect we might need over the course of the next 3 to 5 years, sometimes even further down the road. And then we list what our priorities are, and then what we're going to request for any given year.
So in order to go forward with a warrant at town meeting, it needs to be voted on by the capital asset subcommittee.
Well, the capital asset subcommittee will review each request, rate them as far as necessity, whether it's something that absolutely has to be done right now, whether it can be pushed off a little bit, and then decide which ones that they would like to present at a joint meeting between the school department and the Board of Selectmen. And we make our arguments for it. And then the Board of Selectmen can either approve it or not. And then our request, if they don't approve it, we could always go to town meeting because the voters have the ultimate authority on that. Okay, if they do approve it, which, for the past 10 years that I've been on Finance Committee they have for taking our recommendations.
Just, I know last year, trying to get the Pierce Field in, there's a lot of feedback off the track, and track's falling apart, and we said, we'll do field this year, and we'll push the track next year. And I don't wanna go in and say, oh, well, town said I don't wanna borrow, so, oh well.
Well,
I really wanna
Hopefully
push
it's
it.
Well, I think that's this committee. The capital asset committee develops a 5-year plan that goes to the selectmen.
Yeah.
So,
again, we can make our recommendations.
Yeah.
They just don't have to accept it. Now, the financing for the track is very different from these capital asset items that we have here, because there are other funding sources that we could potentially get money from. Last year for the Pierce Field, we used the CBC, thank you very much. That portion of that tax money that gets reserved for purchasing or renovating either historical buildings or town-owned properties. We used that. They went out and they borrowed to be against the potential of the income coming in the future to be able to pay for the track. It's something that, depending on how much we could get against the cost of it, it might be something that can be done, depending on whether they would like to get into this with us. It's no guarantee that we would have to request for them to help us out with it.
Thank you.
next meeting's next week.
Next week from tonight, our next meeting, and I'll be happy to update everyone with what goes on there. If you'd like, well, because we don't have another meeting for several weeks, what I could always do is put together an email and let everybody know what's going on in that meeting, keep you updated on the
I
conversation.
agree.
Okay?
And thank you for
All
all
right.
your work on that.
Thank you very much.
Personnel.
Spring coaching assignments, 8B. I'm just going to run through these just for the record. Spring sports, baseball, varsity coach Ken Carney, JV coach Zach Richall. Softball, varsity coach Ann Tinarella, volunteer assistant Sue Ayotte, JV Renee Ronan. Boys lacrosse, varsity coach Dan Joyce, JV Ryan Crowley. Girls lacrosse, varsity Angie Sutherland, JV Andy Albert. Boys and girls track, head coach Steve Belrose, assistant Keith O'Brien, Anthony Nagwany, Tricia Gabor. Girls tennis, Tim Newell. Boys tennis, shared position between Tom Varnum and James Robson. Tyngsborough Middle School track, Adam Bover and Leah Marullo. And Tyngsborough Middle School baseball, Luca Boldick. We are still looking for a middle school softball coach at this point. So when that information becomes available, I will update the committee. Anyone interested in coaching middle school softball? Please send an email to Ann Plummer.
Yeah.
Distant learning pilot program.
So you have, at our last meeting, we discussed the proposed pilot model, and we had put the two documents, the community overview and the staff guidelines, into the drive for your review. If you recall, the TTA membership had voted in support of this model and these documents. Since then, we met as an administrative council, as an extended leadership team actually, with principals, assistant principals, special ed facilitators, this past week to talk about the model, implementation plans, rollout. We reviewed the guidelines, particularly the internal staff guidelines for expectations for setting up the work, following through with the work, and assessing the assignments, as well as take attendance on students. So each principal shared out with us what their rollout, so to speak, is going to be at the staff level. Some will do staffing, some will be doing team meetings, and others will be going door to door, so to speak, to meet with teachers, either by subject area or by prep time break, to talk through to make sure we have some consistency. Dr. Flanagan and I will then be meeting with a couple members of the TTA sometime between now and the beginning of next week to update them on that meeting as well as this meeting, provided we get your blessing this evening on the model. And at that point, we'll follow up with parent information letters. We'll send out the community overview, and we'll do really good PR at the school area opportunity for the community so people know exactly how this is rolling out, what the intent is. And we're all cognizant of the fact that this is our pilot opportunity to kind of, get the bumps out of the way as much as possible ahead of time, learn from this model, and then that steering committee or the planning team will get back together after we've done this, before the end of the year, talk about what went well, what we need to tweak again, and then we'll come back to you with a report back from that steering committee to talk about potential changes or rollout for next year.
So specific to that point, again, we're gonna pilot this, and the hope is we can pilot this year for one day. As we know, in March, we generally build a calendar for next year, so at our first meeting in March, we'll have a proposed calendar. That will not reflect any distance learning proposals until we've met after this pilot to really assess how it went. So the hope would be we approve, a preliminary approval on the school calendar in March, and then we'd come back in June saying, here's our suggestion for next year, 1 day, 2 days, 0 days, and potentially revise our school calendar in June. Still plenty of time for parents to get in front of it. The big thing right now are vacation dates and those types of things. But we're gonna need to get a preliminary calendar out there and then potentially revise it in June is what I wanna just make you aware of.
So this time, we're looking for a motion hopefully to accept the pilot program and the documents as presented.
Make a motion to accept the pilot program and the documents as presented.
Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That carries 6-0-0.
Maybe one question, we haven't used any days yet, have we?
No, this is,
Last week, I don't know what happened.
Well, that's right, yeah, no kids.
just
No, we've not.
early
I think we've only had 2 delays.
delays.
But some of our surrounding communities have though, so we're ahead of them at this point. All right, we'll go into finance. Mr. Messina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 8 bill warrants were presented to you tonight. In your drive is a list of warrant numbers, accounts, and amounts. For signing of payroll, as of the last time we recognized payroll dates, there were 2 payrolls, January 21st and February 4th. Also in your drive are the warrant numbers, accounts, and amounts for those 2. And that is it for finance.
We don't meet again until first Monday in March, so.
If I don't anticipate any signing of bills in between. If there is a need, I'll reach out to the 2 single signers and see if one of them is available to come in.
Thank you. School committee discussion.
I have nothing at this time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm all set.
I just want to say thank you to Mr. Mitchell for extending his time and putting together a program like that. It's another way that we get authentic, real-life opportunities for kids to learn and apply what they learn, particularly in this business model in a world where public speaking skills, interaction, marketing, selling yourself and making connections at younger and younger ages is so important. And to do it in a face-to-face way in a professional setting, in a really steered educational way is important. And again, he's just another example of teachers in our community going above and beyond, adding things to the program, and I think it's what makes our programming and our foundation so special. So thank you to him. Congratulations to the students who have moved ahead in the first year program. It's a big deal, yeah. So thank you very much.
I'm all set. Thank you.
I'd just like to say it's a nice night Friday night for the trivia night. I think the Teen Scholarship Trust raised over a couple $1,000 for the kids at class of 2019.
That's great.
Great night.
I want to thank Mr. Mullin for being patient with all my questions.
That's my job.
It's just important to me that we don't go back on our promise from last year, so I'm just trying to understand the process, so thank you.
Nothing tonight.
Me neither. However, we do have need for an executive session to discuss the strategy with respect to the collective bargaining or litigation. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body as declared by the chair. We will return from executive session only to the matter of the proceedings. This action requires a roll call vote.
Make a
In-
motion to go into executive session.
Second.
This does require a roll call vote.
In favor.
In favor.
In there.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
Thank you all and have a good night.